can start. You can start, Dubeyji, by unmuting.
Okay. Uh, Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be back again. And I want to extend a very warm welcome to Ms. Jayshree Nambiar, who had very kindly agreed to our request to be present today and talk about thinking about authority and power. Since Jayshree has already spoken in this group, I'll give a brief introduction. Uh, Jayshree has been an educator for more than 3 decades. She has been a teacher, principal of the school, and presently she is the secretary of the school in Chennai. She was drawn to education because of the promise and potential for engagement with people and knowledge, freedom and creativity. As a teacher, she has worked with the teaching and learning of history, particularly historiography, and by examining the potential for learning history through first hand experience, observation, and discussion. She has taught English language and literature and a course on media. She is also a trustee of the Krishnamurti Foundation India. Uh, I want to thank Jayshree once again for being with us today. And Jayshree, you can start your talk. You can take as long as you want, leaving at least half an hour for question and answers. Yes, Jayshree.
Thank you, Dubeji. So good morning to everyone. As soon as I came in, I was speaking and expressing how happy I am that these sessions have been going on for 1.5 years. And I think it's wonderful that this dialogue has continued month after month. And now I must thank you for having me for this session and being encouraging of me to talk on a topic, a tough topic, a topic that I have only been thinking about, and that is why the topic thinking about authority and power. But I've been thinking about it for a while. So whatever I share is from my experience, from conversations I have had, and what I have read and thought over. Therefore, the way I will look at authority, the topic for today, is not from understanding, but really from the hope to understand. And I hope together we will be able to work towards a somewhat better understanding than each of us have at present. So I have put together a selection of thoughts and will attempt to lead towards perhaps the fundamental question that Krishnamurti raised, which I will come to after a point. So I would like to speak for about 30 minutes and request a few of you or all of you to speak and offer your own understanding of your experience with authority. I think in all aspects of our lives, we come into touch with it, but don't often question it enough. But I'm sure at periods of all your lives, this has been a question, and it would be wonderful to hear each of you share your experiences with it also, not necessarily to agree with what I've said or to disagree, but to really share experience, because that will be useful for all of us. And there is a lot more that I will wish to speak to that I will not today, because a lot of my thoughts are still nascent and inarticulate. And I won't be able to bring that to the session. But I do hope what I will say will not be too cluttered and will make enough sense to be taken further. So I thought I would begin with my own personal ground for this exploration into this question. I started teaching when I was 21, but I became really conscious of the work that I was doing after joining the Krishnamurti school in Chennai, where I have been for the last 35 years or so. So within my first months of teaching, I was young, and one day I was taken aback when a parent of a student at school approached me saying that his son spent much of his time watching television and often the same Tamil film over and over again. He asked me if I would speak with his son about this. I was taken aback. I was taken aback because what would make a child listen to such a young and new teacher? And what gave the parent the confidence that I might be able to help? The parent did not know me, and his own son wouldn't listen to him. So this was my first indication of the power that is invested in the role, in the authority of a teacher. When I moved from being a teacher of a subject to a class teacher, those in education will be familiar with this, and students kept referring to me for instructions, for advice, to solve conflicts, I saw that authority, the notion of authority, was deeply ingrained in all of us, children included. And the need to hold authority with responsibility became humbling and most important. Much later, when I took on the role of principal, I learned much more. Suddenly, I found myself at the center of a very new and different space from what I had spent my entire adulthood in, almost overnight. The same place, the same school, the same people, my colleagues, but I was plunged into the work and personal lives of colleagues. I became visible as the most significant person in school for the parents, the holder of all knowledge of whatever kind for the students, and the decision maker for outsiders to the school. And I was very struck by this and almost frightened. And it struck me that this was a role that required the utmost care. And I must disabuse both myself and people around of the power that such a role would imply. So it was heady, it was difficult to accept. And the role and its implication needed to be understood. For very often we respond without thinking. And it is only in moments of reflection, now and then, that you begin to see something else. And I needed to see that it was not me, but the role that was invested with authority. And if I were to misuse it, if I were to use power, then it would be a very different thing. So it was not about me, but about the responsibility that I was invested with. And this was a very important distinction. And it has continued to occupy my mind in very different ways. So I began to understand why authority in popular thinking is linked to power in popular thinking. So as I looked around, a new question crystallized. Why is it that we link authority with power and not authority with care? It is with this question that I will begin and end with this morning. Why is it that authority is linked with power in popular thinking, in our own thoughts perhaps, and not with care? The literature in business organizations, if you look at the various business magazines that come out, abound in articles that examine the relationship between authority and power, with advice to the reader, perhaps the team leader, a manager, a chief executive officer, on how to hold authority and what leadership entails. The articles speak about the need to be consultative, to decentralize. They speak of the power to command others and exact obedience. They tell you how to do this. They speak of coordination and delegation in managerial terms. They speak about working towards organizational objectives. They speak about the role of personality and politics, the place of the charisma of the leader. And the implication is that authority and power together refer to the ability to have one's will carried out despite the resistance of others. So it is really power over and not power with responsibility. So from this, the link between authority and power, it seems to me, is a very fraught relationship, is a very troubled relationship. If we were to look at definitions, authority is defined as a legal and formal right to take decisions. It is attached to the position and lies in the designation and is restricted to the organization. I'll just go over that again. So a formal definition of authority is the legal and formal right to take decisions. And it is always attached to the position. And this authority lies in the designation. And it is restricted only to that organization. In other words, it is legitimate power. Authority is therefore static and it is context-based. However, the way we see authority and the way authority is held in most places that we know, it is difficult to ignore its link with power. Now, Krishnamurti distinguishes between outer authority and inner authority. And this is perhaps this is a very sensible distinction. The outer authority, Krishnamurti says, sometimes rational, sometimes irrational, has its place and its responsibility. One cannot brush it aside. And the intelligence of freedom knows its limitations and its necessity. At another time, he says, in any community, law and the policeman are necessary. Now, in our own daily lives, we see corruption in the legal system, and there is much brutality in the hands of the law keepers. So what has happened to this outer authority or the authority that is invested in them? It slowly gets intertwined with one's own ego and sense of power. And this is not in fiction, but we see it in news all around us in actuality. We have great brutalities from the hands of law keepers and lawmakers, and in the hands of authority in the various organizations that we live in. So for a moment, let's also look at the definition of power. Now, power is defined, and it's very different from authority. It is defined as the personal capacity to influence others. It is independent. It is not dependent on your role. It is independent. It is informal and often accepted in society or self-given. Power attempts to control others' actions and decisions. And it is not hierarchical, as designations are, and it flows in any direction and is not confined to boundaries. There is often an element of politics also attached to it. And this is where corruption and nepotism come in. So power is illegitimate in nature, and it has agency and is used for a result. And power is often based on the binary of you have and I don't. And binaries never help in relating well with each other. So this is one part of authority which is generally understood, and how, rather than look at what we may call functional authority, we tend to merge it with our personalities and our desire for power. Now, there is further authority in our affective lives. That is relating to feelings, attitudes, and moods. So the same fraught relationship between authoritarian models and power permeates or goes through our social lives as well, our social lives and our personal lives, all those which lead to feelings, to attitudes, to emotions, to moods. So these are social, financial, and familial and personal structures, social, familial, and personal structures of authority and power that are received and perpetuated by us in our relationships with each other. So this is the next step that I want to come to. And these are far more complex. So there is, I'd like to go through it with two examples, both in a daily sense and which people may have come across quite easily. So the first example is based on hierarchy, on power, on exclusion, on subservience. And this is the example. So let us say that I have, through years of growing up, or in the early years of adulthood, grown aware of caste divisions in society. And that my caste, and I've grown aware that my caste, the caste to which I was born to, has been denied opportunities for generations in this unequal society. I have grown to see the upper caste as one homogeneous, advantaged group. And I find it difficult to come to terms with it, and rightly so. And I see that this power given to the authority of caste, of knowledge and its attendant rights, I see it as unjust. And I see the need to resist it, to oppose it. Now, this permeates a lot of our activities in the world. Division of caste, there are for other such divisions. Now, anyway, however, in this fictional narrative, however, I may not see that I am a part of the continuation of this age-old problem of caste division and hierarchy. And how am I a part of this? I have accepted the hierarchy, and the only way that I can oppose it is by making it outside of myself. Something I need to fight. And this colors everything that I see, and I interpret all I come across in the light of structures of power and authority. And I'm sure we are all familiar with situations of this kind. So even if I step, going back to the fictional I, so even if I step into a place of attempt, which tries to treat all people with respect, regardless of difference, I prefer to remain at the periphery, not confident enough to enter, and finding the strength in looking in from outside. And when I look at what happens from the outside, I prove what I have felt all along. I judge the proceedings and the action. In other words, I have become accepting of this power structure. I have enabled authority and remain on the outside. This is a very complex situation and is something that we have inherited over generations, and we have attempted to resolve, but it hasn't been enough. Now, therefore, it forms a source of conflict. I choose here to underline systems of authority and power and how it is very difficult to put them aside. Further, I wish to underline that power affects both parties adversely, those who feel they have power and those who feel they do not have power. Now, systemic interventions, particularly in the area of caste and class and gender, which have come up, interventions that have come up in anger, that have come up through the language of rights and ethics, through people's movements, have brought about significant systemic and attitudinal change in society. Yet it seems still clear that one has to move out of this vortex of conflict created by age-old authorities and hierarchies and self-given power, and move into a center of working together and of cooperation, where as long as divisions exist in the minds of the people present, working together and cooperation become extraordinarily difficult on whichever side of the power you are on. Now let us imagine another situation, the story of a man. Now he has a son, this fictional person has a son who's stepping into adulthood and making his own living. His grandfather was a refugee, forced into fleeing from his home with nothing and living in a camp at the mercy of the norms of a new country. He has heard stories of how his grandfather worked as a driver, lived in poverty, and of how through sheer work, he got the franchisee of a tire shop and later began a small transport business which his father inherited and developed. When it was this man's turn to work, he had to work in the business, which he did for a while. It was a tourism business. But he found it difficult to meet his father's expectations, and the father's demands of hard work were too much for him because he has not lived through the circumstances that his father lived. And he wondered why he needs to do exactly as his father did. So after an acrimonious tussle, he left to follow his own calling. Now he wants his son to take on his company. But the son does not want to work hard, just like he did not earlier. The son wants to tell others what to do because he sees himself as the son of the manager and wants to continue with that role. He wants to do things his own way. And his father says that is all wrong. So here is a source of conflict, something we are very familiar with, and caused by notions of intermingled authority and power. The father feels justified in his demand of his son, that he has worked hard to please the family, is in a good situation, and that the son needs to do the same. He is unable to understand that his son is an individual living under very different circumstances, and that the tussle is about the father's ambition and sentiment and the son's cry for independence and individuality. The father feels the authority over the son and concern for the son. And the son feels the power of the father and senses his own struggle to obey or disobey. So along with these, there are many stories of the influence of one's background and personal ambition, and how these notions of authority wield power. There are many such stories in our daily lives. This is apparent in how we have others to work for us and be at the receiving end of our treatment because we have wealth and therefore the choice they do not have. People of different races are disempowered because we believe some races are inferior to others. There is the authority of age and seniority, the authority of patriarchy in the home, the power structures of gender-based roles in our lives, and the power adults have over children. We know dependence and we reproduce authority and division in all our circles of living. Now, Krishnamurti offers us significant insights into our personal lives, into our own daily lives, which surely informs our social and work relations. And I refer to two such insights, and I quote him. He speaks of an inner authority. The inner authority, I'm quoting him, open quotes, the inner authority, which is subtler and deeper, is much more complex. Guidelines which seem to give certainty and assurance become a pattern, the norm, which becomes the authority. This authority may be traditional a person, a symbol, or an idea. In another context, he says, the first thing to understand in this inquiry is the nature of authority. These are Krishnamurti's words. In any community, law and the policeman are necessary. But we have also introduced a policeman to the inner work of thought and feeling. Obedience to one's parents, to society, to the priest. But obedience is born of fear, fear of going wrong, of acting independently, of not being secure, fear of not being part of the community, fear of standing alone, of making a mistake. So it is fear that breeds authority, close quotes. Krishnamurti says that disturbance and disorder in our minds is the cause of the acceptance of authority. The acceptance of authority, open quotes, is caused by disturbance and disorder. The effect is the authority, and the reaction to that is to conform or to deny. And denial brings about suppression, control, or escape. And the very movement culminates in a principle or belief, a standard which assumes dominance. To unpack that a bit, see, I have thought about the nature of authority for a while, and I have been guided in this by my reading of Krishnamurti. So it is true that we seek authority when there is chaos and confusion in society. The period between the two world wars threw up the fascist dictators. Why did so many people participate in this authoritarian mode of governance? In personal life, we look to authority when we are disturbed, when we are in conflict, when we are sorrowing. What makes the authority possible? From the authority of a dictator to the authority of another, to the authority of one's experience and belief. So to examine this, I would like to move to the individual realm and then lead on to how Krishnamurti addresses the question of authority. So in daily life, I've come across two aspects of our lives as individuals that allow for the creation of authority and which are very easy to see. And I want to put forward that the two aspects are laziness and fear. What would these look like when we meet them? Now, laziness is the reluctance to act on your own and to take responsibility for your actions. It is far easier to have someone tell you what to do than to act on your own. And this we have seen in all our organizations, where so many people just wish they were told what to do and did not have to take initiative. So this diminishes one's responsibility and allows you to blame the authority you have enabled for things that do not work. So I see laziness as one of the reasons why we give in to authority. Second, we are very frightened beings. We are frightened of what others will say, of doing something wrong, of being blamed. We are afraid of what we do not know, of a repeat of things that have happened in the past. So we enable authority to which we are obedient. We are frightened of others, of our past. We develop beliefs, superstitions, and seek spiritual leaders to quieten our minds, to still our minds from fear. When we are confused or in sorrow, we turn to help, to someone who will tell us what to do. A guru, a counselor, who will still the disturbance. So from this arises our need for authority, and could we question this? Now, in Krishnamurti's words, he says, there is immensely greater difficulty of rejecting our own inward authority the authority of our particular little experiences and accumulated opinions, knowledge, ideas, and ideals. You had an experience yesterday which taught you something, and what it taught you becomes a new authority. And in an uncompromising way, Krishnamurti says, and that authority of yesterday is as destructive as the authority of 1,000 years. And I see this because regularly in my work, you come across situations which are repetitive, which you feel are repetitive, but they're not. You are different from the person you were yesterday. The child who's in front of you is different, or your colleague is different from the person he or she was yesterday. But yet we tend to apply what we think we have learned from experience, rather than observe the situation anew. Now, Krishnamurti was uncompromising in his view on authority. All authority of any kind, especially in the field of thought and understanding, Krishnamurti says, is the most destructive evil thing. Leaders destroy the followers, and followers destroy the leaders. You have to be your own teacher and your own disciple. You have to question everything that man has accepted as valuable, as necessary. Then he says, to be free of all authority of your own and that of another is to die to everything of yesterday, so that your mind is always fresh, always young, innocent, full of vigor and passion. And again, he says, you cannot depend upon anybody. There is no guide, no teacher, no authority. There is only you and your relationship with others in the world. So he suggests, or what I receive from my readings of him, is that there is a movement, there is a possibility of putting aside all this. He says, first, to understand that authority comes from disorder. Second, to understand that we seem to be craving for authority to take away the responsibility from ourselves. So Krishnamurti suggests that we can talk things over, or I receive from Krishnamurti that we can talk things over. And clearly, so he says, when we talk things over reasonably and clearly, seeing each other, seeing together, there is no authority. So when we all talk things over reasonably and clearly, seeing together, there is no authority. If we all see the same thing, there is no need for agreement. If you are in disorder inwardly and outwardly, you are creating authority. The world, he goes on to say in another talk, the world is each one of us. To feel that, to be really committed to it and to nothing else, brings about a feeling of great responsibility and an action that must not be fragmentary, but whole. So it was the reading of Krishnamurti that helped me break through the notion that all authority is outward. One tends to believe that. But my reading of Krishnamurti allowed me to question that and to see psychological authority as it is. And this is the question that Krishnamurti raised and could be fundamental to all his work. Is it possible to live without relying psychologically on any authority, either on external authority or even on the authority of one's own past experience? This is the question that Krishnamurti raised. Now, for Krishnamurti, it is in the freedom for authority that one can really know what is real. This is central to Krishnamurti's teachings, the formation of the self. And this would lead to another inquiry altogether, because the formation of the self is really at the root of authority. Now, Krishnamurti's own approach to teachings, and that most of us are familiar with, gives us a glimpse of a teacher who uses no authority, no power. Now, he proposed no theories or critiques. He was interested in life as it is lived in the daily sense. He spoke to engage his listener in dialogue on an aspect of experience or behavior that the listener could be familiar with. Why does a child lie? Why do we sorrow over a loss? What makes us hurt? Now, often this made, in the course of one's listening to Krishnamurti, a question might lead to an insight or a clarity. Often this made the listener question patterns in his or her own life. What does it mean to know oneself and to live in this world is the question we are left with listening to Krishnamurti. He asks us to examine through his questions our own experiences and the way we view the world. He speaks of the significance of observation and listening, and more difficult, of choiceless awareness in examining oneself. So now, in conclusion, what is the work of a Krishnamurti school? I mean, what does a school do with all this? What do a group of people who come together in the school do with this? So the work of a Krishnamurti school is to understand the role of authority and the play of power, and to go beyond it and to allow for reflection and an awareness. So to put it very briefly, the attempt in a school would be to create an atmosphere of talking and working together. An atmosphere that allows one to question oneself, the teacher and the student, and see the importance of looking at every situation afresh. An atmosphere that demands that we learn not to use our authority to influence others. And as a teacher, this is a very significant task. An atmosphere that is free of fear and therefore allows for learning. And finally, an atmosphere that understands that freedom is not the right to do what one wants, but is a freedom from fear and authority, and understand that it goes together with responsibility and care. So this is really a work in progress, and that is why thoughts on authority and thoughts about authority and power. And I'm not sure how I will really respond to questions, but I would very much like to hear of your views and your experiences. So with this, Dubeji, I will conclude.
Thank you. Thank you, Jayshree. You have spoken very well and covered the whole canvas of authority and power, responsibilities. Krishna used to say that the Indian mind is authority bound. And we see that in our country, we give tremendous importance to authority, whether it is governmental authority or political authority or judicial authority or religious authority and so on. But I think authority is basically a responsibility given to discharge certain functions. And the moment we appropriate it in the personal domain and misuse it, I look at it as power because, like we say very in common word that power corrupts. Uh, in physics, we define power as something, I mean, the amount of energy transferred or converted per unit of time. But the dictionary meaning of power is the ability to control people or things to do certain things. So I think it's a very complex subject as you have mentioned, uh, and I thank you for bringing it up and speaking so well. But I would like others also to say something, and I can see Dinesh ji, Mr. Dinesh Waghmare raising in that. So yes, Dinesh ji, please go ahead, add something to it. Unmute yourself.
Madam, are you able to listen to me?
Yes.
Can you? My voice is clear?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Madam, I am coming from a background of corporate world. So basically, in our views, authority and power comes later on. First is what is vision and mission. So vision and mission, basically that decides the authority and power. We can say that there are three things: philosophy, ideology, and implementation. So this power and the question of authority and power, that is a part of your ideology. But what is your mission? What is your agenda basically? What you are trying to achieve? What are your philosophy behind it? Say if the question is of freedom, as we see in the matter of your JK and this thing, then we can question authority and power. But when there is a law and order case, then your vision and your mission will decide your agenda, and accordingly you will provide the uh, authority and power. Say if the question is of education field, then we will select a potential good teacher, and we will assign or we will give him authority. If it is a case of law and order and this thing, then we will select a person of IPS cadre and all that. So basically, and when you select a wrong person, then you will find a corruption and misuse of power. So power, authority and power are the later things. First is what is your agenda, what is your mission, and what is your agenda basically, what you want to do. So that will actually decide this authority and power. And authority, with the authority, power automatically will come, because power is basically the implementation part, and authority is the ideological part, and the philosophy is basically what is your vision, mission, and this thing. So power is, I think, obviously comes with the authority. And authority, if we see in the worldly matters, then authority and power are must. These are my views. Yes, as far as spiritual world is concerned, okay, what JK says that your authority is you should not follow any authority, because there the question is of the self freedom, or knowing the self and getting freedom from the self. So there the question is different. But when the question is of worldly affair, then power and authority, both the things are go together, and I think authority and power are must. You said that you also talked about the inner authority. So inner authority means inner potential, and inner potential will give you the authority. Suppose in the case of education field, if you are having a affinity towards that particular field, then you will become a good teacher. So and you, for the good teacher, you will give the authority of that particular field. So I think inner potential and inner this thing decides the inner authority. And when the question is of the self freedom and self, there the question of self knowledge comes. And then in case of your self freedom from the ego, you have to negate, or you have to what JK says, that you have to negate that your ego and your inner authority. These are my views. What do you have to say on that?
Thank you.
Dinesh ji.
Yes, thank you. I listened to what you've said, and I'm not able to separate the the way one functions in daily life, whether it's an organization or whether it's in a family or whether with friends or with colleagues. I'm not able to separate that from the authority of the from a sense of what shall I say, from us from the sense of power. For instance, power is relational. It depends on our relationships. So while I am given authority in a company, the manner in which I relate to my colleagues is where I would talk about power. Am I giving them the freedom to have their views? Am I imposing my view on them? The point that you made about outer authority is very true. We do need law and order. We do need, when a community comes, a functional authority. And that is important. But what happens when authority becomes power in a relational sense? That is when I think there is a problem. And that's when the ego comes in, whether it's in the workplace or in one's relationships. That's my thinking right now. Yes.
Thank you, Jayshree. Thank you. Harshad Bhai, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, are you able to hear?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Hello, good morning, friends, and Jayshree. I like to say something about my experience as a teacher in Rishi Valley School. When I joined the school as a teacher, I liked teaching, of course, but I was very mild person. So sometimes when I was a new teacher, and students, they used to make a lot of noise, not listening. And I would say again and again to students that I don't like to be an authority. I want you to be behave properly, listen carefully on your own. But I found that the students were not able to take their own responsibility. And so it used to become very noisy and disorderly. Then sometimes the students also came to me and said that, sir, you have to be strict, because if you are not strict, then the student will not listen to you. And some teachers were very strict and they were respected by the students, and the students would listen to them. So when we don't like to take the responsibility on our own, then we want somebody else to take responsibility for us. And when I became a principal in Sayadri School, and I don't like that kind of position of a principal, because I don't like to tell people how they should do things. I enjoy relating with students, but with adults, it's very difficult. And if you are very mild as a principal, then teachers will do whatever they like to do. They will not listen to you. And if you are very strict, then they also don't like you. So either way, it is a very difficult job to be a principal, to be somebody in power. And I did not like it, but I had to do it. They requested me. So I was there for 1 year, and I did not like that kind of power and to plan many things, to talk with many adults. So this is my experience. And about authority and authenticity, they are two different things. Like Krishna ji, the way he spoke was very, very powerful, as if that this is the way it is. But I think it was coming not from authority, but from authenticity, because he had investigated very, very deeply and he had some clarity. And from that clarity, he was speaking with such power. So, okay, that is what I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing this.
So I can go ahead. Yeah. So I need your authority, Dubey, to tell me I can go ahead. Okay. So your smile is telling me I can go ahead, though you are muted. It's okay. So let me first establish Pradeep Prakash's authority to speak about authority. You see, he's a behavioral science professional and he's working a lot in the area of authority and power, and he's working in encounter groups and their authority issues day in and day out. And this is a huge process of healing, learning, and growth. So there is a huge work has been done in this field, and I have been associated with many such works on authority and power. Number one. So authority is established. So second point I want to say is, since as a child, when we are born, every child is exposed to authority of parents. It gets so deep rooted psychologically in authority and acceptance of authority that I can guarantee there is not a single human being in this entire world who is free from this influence of authority, and who is, and many experiments have been done by psychologists on asking students to go and give shocks to other students, and because some authority is telling, and they give shocks without any guilt. The entire world war, the entire army, the entire military is functioning because of this power of authority. So the question that actually Krishnamurti is perhaps addressing is the dysfunctionality of authority processes. There is huge functionality of authority process. Even in this group right now, if Mr. Dubey doesn't exercise the authority of muting other people, there may be a chaos, as Harshad has also said. So authority has its function, and different people have different response to their authority behavior. Some people will be submissive and rebellious. Some people are able to relate with authority person as one human being to another on one-to-one level. So the real question which Krishnamurti is asking us to free us from authority, according to my understanding, is that don't accept it as right or wrong because somebody is saying it, because my boss is saying, or Krishnamurti is saying, or because Krishnamurti has said. And for example, I give the example here. Somewhere in this, somebody quoted that Krishna ji has said that people close to me, they don't even have the foggiest idea of what I have been talking about this. A very deflating for many egos around those people who were close to him. So, and I said, why do you have to take it as authority? He has said it, he may have said it, it doesn't mean that he's right. Many people might have got a lot of insights and got, but if you believe that he was an authority and that's what he said, so you continue to say, okay, these people did not have the foggiest of the ideas. So the question is, am I free and able to see objectively and live my life without these dysfunctional influences of authority? That is the main issue. Authority will always be there. It has a lot of functions. All the socializations of all the human beings, all the children is done because of authority. Without that, there is no socialization possible. And without that, society is also not possible. So authority has a very, very important function. But the question is dysfunctionality of the authority. Like Hitler exercised a lot of authority. The military generals exercise a lot. If some boss tells me you go and kill this military, well, people are saying, okay, you go and kill those Pakistanis or whatever your enemies are. You go and kill. You don't feel guilty because the responsibility is his. So there is a lot of dysfunctionality also associated with it. So we have to separate that dysfunctionality and functionality and free ourselves from the dysfunctionality and understand the dynamics fully. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Pradeep ji. Dinesh ji, you want to say something else? Yes, unmute yourself.
Yeah, Madam was also talking about, you were also talking about this cooperation and group, doing the things in a group with a lot of affection and love and caring. But that is possible only if suppose a teacher is interested in teaching and the student is interested in playing. So again, automatically the authority and the power comes in the picture. We also see in the case of Upanishad, the guru is also interested in giving the knowledge, and the student is also equally interested and vibrating at the same level, and he is also interested in getting the knowledge. Then the question of cooperation and no authority and no power comes into the picture. But if suppose the student is not interested and the teacher is interested, then automatically then automatically this question of authority and power will come into the picture, because you have to move the student, or you have to take him to in a particular direction, or you have to give him the knowledge. So I think this power and this authority both will come into the question in such cases. What do you have to say?
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that. I'm asking, can we look at it a little differently? Let us say the teacher wants to teach and the student doesn't want to be interested. The teacher has to teach and the student is not interested at that point. So what if we were to look at talking over this together? You know, it's an assumption that the student doesn't want to learn. And the teacher doesn't want to teach and is doing it only because it's his job. What if the teacher and the student were to sit together and say, how do we make learning happen? Today, I don't feel like teaching, or tomorrow you don't feel like learning. But how do we make learning happen? So if the transaction in the classroom is a way of understanding responsibility, understanding attention, understanding working together, if that is the purpose of the class and the physics that I teach or the history that I teach becomes the tool by which we learn this, there might be a possibility. So that we don't look at it as let's take another company, for instance. Let us take, for instance, any company where you're working with a team. Now the team leader wants this, but surely if you are interested in it, you can work together. So if your interest is something that is not the team leaders, that is not the team members, but together you want to create something. And if you look at the team leader as the role that, say, Dubeyji is doing here, which is to hold us all together, and leave it at that, and the two of you can talk and work together, maybe there is a chance of cooperation and and less conflict.
Yeah. Thank you, Jayshree. Very well said. Anybody else? Shakti ji, you want to say something?
Yes, sir. My voice is reaching, sir.
Yes.
Yeah. You know, this question of authority is very complex, because first thing that I don't agree with Harshad ji, that, you know, one can connect with the students, but with adults it becomes different, because in some way I think that in a school, even the teachers, even the principals, they are all are children in a way. We all are children in a way, learners. But what happens is that somebody is given a specific responsibility. I would like to share one personal experience with you, because it does the dilemma. Long ago, I was in Bombay, and there was some recording of Srimad Bhagavad Gita was going on, and so they had some Panditji and who was taking care of the Sanskrit pronunciation there. And now this Panditji has suddenly gone away. So somebody knew me, so I went there. They were a very famous music director, he was recording. But the pronunciation was problematic at this point, problematic at other point, problematic. So I indicated immediately that no, this has this problem, this has this problem. After the first session, the producers and they came to me, they said, Panditji never raised so many objections. I said, look, you are paying me for that. So I need to raise the objections, otherwise I am betraying myself. So the question is here in this case, I was the authority because I knew something. For that, I was invited there. It was a group project. Later on, when it goes outside, those people would also listen to it who know Sanskrit. They will see the problems. So these problems should be solved at that place. So that authority is connected with responsibility. So the other person's authority who says, because I am spending the money, and so, one or two mistakes can be no problem about it, This type of things, they become another type of authority. So I could not say at that place, no, koi baat nahi, as you like, no, because I say either I leave it, why should you pay to me? So that is the thing about authority. It's a very multifaceted thing. It's very complex. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shakti. Thank you. Mr. Soundar Rajan, you want to say something?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. I think there is a little echo in your voice, but it's okay. Go ahead.
Okay. I was a government servant for 30 years, and I always obeyed authority because I felt I was not competent in my job. So I have to please my boss. And I was afraid of change of locations, of transfers. So this incompetence in my job, I felt, and I am afraid of change of fear of transfers. And I loved the security that after 20 years of service, I'll get a pension. So all these fears kept me obedient to authority. That's all, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. I think it's just a comment. Jayshree, would you like to say something on this?
No, just to thank you for this honesty. Really, thank you.
Anandji, please unmute yourself. You have a question.
So yes, sir. I mean, the moment when I say a teacher and a student, can there be any communication, sir? I mean, the levels are different. A student thinks the teacher knows much more than he does, and the teacher says, I know better than him. So can there be communication? I mean, K is talking about something else. I mean, he talks about being a student and a teacher. How do one understand that is a question, sir? And again, when I say responsibility from who? I mean, how do I look at it, sir? I mean, when a teacher, is it teacher's responsibility or student's responsibility? When I say teacher, student, again, there is a problem. Can I look at that? Is a question, sir.
This question brings up something quite interesting. When it comes to academic learning, the teacher and the student are not on the same plane. The teacher certainly knows and is helping the student learn and work towards it. Even there are times when the teacher learns something through the discussion in class. But there is another experience. If schools did not look only at academics, there is another area where the teacher and the student are on the same plane. For instance, we are both frightened. And both the teacher and the student feel envy, for instance, feel fear, feel a desire for something that he or she does not get. And I have seen some remarkable conversations are possible between teachers and students if both are open and neither say they know. And the teacher and the student are on the same plane here, because we are all susceptible to hurt. So it is possible, but not necessarily in the academic realm. There too, it's possible for the teacher to learn something. But in the psychological realm, one is no different from the other. And the experience of the teacher often comes in the way of a good conversation.
Thank you, Jayshree. I think we have Mr. Ravi from Uttarkashi. Ravi, please go ahead. Ask a question.
Very good morning and very good lecture on these things. You talked very well on the outer as well inner authority. But my question is, I want to explore more into inner authority, how you experimented with the inner authority, the first thing. And about outer authority is that when you are not competent, as Mr. Soundar Rajan very honestly, very bluntly accepted it, then you accept the outer authority because you are feel irresponsible, you are incompetent, and you do not know what to do and where to do. In corporate world itself, I worked and I was very fortunate to have very unauthoritative bosses, and they had given me all the time freedom to decide and take the decisions, and that bring me a kind of confidence and competentness, and I was very curious to learn those things, and whenever I got the opportunity, I learned. And against those things, even my bosses were paying me, but I was not asking them anything. I was taking all the calls, all the decisions by myself. So outer authority brings we brings the outer authority then when we are not competent enough. And so the J. Krishnamurti brought me about this inner authority. I was not aware. So I would like to explore with you how you experimented with that thing. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll get a little personal here. Now, it's 6 months ago was when I gave up my role of being a principal. Now, the question for me has been that how will I nurture the new principal? Do I know all? All I have is the authority of experience. That's all. And I know that the authority of experience is fairly useless when it goes to a deeper point, because every situation that you come across is new and the ways of dealing with it are varied. So what we need is really a deep affection and a desire and a need and an understanding that we need to move out of ourselves. And that's difficult, It's easy to say, oh, if I was there, I would have done it in this manner. Or it's easy to say, I have taught the subject before, this is how you should do it. Or I have done this job before and I know how to manage others. Now you should do what I tell you to do. So how does one move? How does one remove, in a way, the self from your concern for the organization or the institution? So that's been my work with this whole question of inner authority. Also, when we it comes in a number of ways. And thank you for asking that question, because you also see that inner authority comes from not just your experience, it also comes from certain superstitions, certain beliefs that one has which you don't examine. So the examining of a belief that you hold is, I think, another way of working with inner authority. Not a superstition, but a belief, a prejudice, an unquestioned thought. So I think working with inner authority demands that you be aware of what is going on around you, what's going on inside as much as you can. And at the same time, question the beliefs that you have held sacrosanct. because they may not work anymore. So it's really working with yourself, your beliefs, your experiences, your relationship to what is outside and to someone else. I don't know if it answers, but I hope it helps.
Thank you, Jayshree. Thank you. Pradeep ji has a question, and then again Anand ji. Pradeep ji, please go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you for my second chance. I want to raise very interesting and very important issue which has been raised by Krishna ji also. It is the guru. The whole concept of guru is based on the authority. And, as children, we have our parents who are authority. And whenever we have problems, we know our parents are there. We go to them and they will solve our problems, and they do solve. But when we grow adults, we become little older and we say, yeah, they are as helpless as I am and they can't solve my problem. So we need somebody who has direct access to God and has an authority to solve all our problems. And we have this childhood need all the time, finding some father figure, some authority to who has solution to all our problems. And so this need is there, and there are so many pseudos gurus who are able to fulfill that need and make a massive following and build a huge business out of that. And for that, I want to thank Krishna ji that he has exposed this a huge business which is based on this authority issue. So authority issue is not a very simple issue. All I'm saying is it has a huge business potential for people who want to exploit this, because all the people, including old 70, 80, 90 years old, have this strong need to find some fellow who can solve their problem, who like their father, and these gurus are very easy to fill that space. I have seen very highly educated MD, DMs, PhDs who are having these gurus and who go to these gurus for solving these problems. So it's a huge business potential. So this offer is open to all of you. You can use this and exploit it if you wish. So please be aware that this authority thing has a great ramifications in our life. So this is another issue that I would like to raise. Thank you. That's all.
Very true, very true.
Thank you. Thank you, Pradeep ji. Anand ji, you want to say something? Unmute yourself. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So when I say, how do I understand, sir, when I say academically, I know more than you? The moment I say, can I see there's a division, there's a fragmentation, which leads to conflict. How does one understand that? Intentions are good. That's part of my conditioning. To do good, again, it's part of my conditioning. Inner authority or outer authority. I know more than you. That is what it is. All authority has been over a time or a period of time has shown the kind of problems it has created on the planet. Even today, authority is very destructive. It is, in fact, cases authority is evil. How does one understand that is a question, sir?
Yeah, I'll respond to that. Now, what about the plumber? He certainly knows more than I do, on these matters. So if we were to look at the role at the teachers work with academics as something that he or she has been trained for, like a plumber, like a cook, like an instructor of yoga, for instance, or a games instructor. So if we, so the need to separate that role from the relational aspect of how you transact that is what is important. So you're pointing to something very important. How do I teach in a manner in which I respect the other person? How do I do my work of a plumber or a cook and respect the others who work along with me? So authority, I think, gets dysfunctional, a word that was used, or becomes power in the relational context. When I say I am better than you, that is where the conflict lies.
Thank you, Jayshree. Thank you. Shakti ji, please unmute yourself. Yeah.
is that this one aspect of this question of authority is that we unconsciously we create authority even when it is not needed, because it seems that there is something deeper than the usual reasons for that. For example, somebody has been reading Krishnamurti for a while, and then somewhere in Krishnamurti's discourse comes something which is not according to what this person has read previously. So now he stops, because that previously what he has read becomes his authority. This is Krishnamurti has said that, and Krishnamurti has said this also. But that whatever has been read has become this person's authority or Krishnamurti's previous discourse authority. So it's very complex. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Shakti ji.
Yeah, can I
Dinesh,
say
you has a
something here?
question. Yes, you can ask.
See, what I want to say, there is other side of coin. What Pradeep ji has said. See, I may have love about somebody, gratitude about somebody who has given me something. We have formed KFI. Why? Because we want that we have in a subtle way we have accepted the authority, but that authority is not because in a usual terms, but in other way we have accepted that he has shared with us his compassion, love, sharing, shared his vision or his teaching with us. So we could have gratitude about somebody and we can accept him as an authority. So that is also the case. Similarly, if I have to make a bungalow, I don't have any knowledge of civil engineering. I have to go to a person and I have to accept that civil engineer's authority. So these are also the points which are to be understood, and these are to be talked about. What Madam has to say on this?
No, absolutely, because it's authority is not a problem if it is given to you in a context. So as a civil engineer, I have to go to a civil engineer for the construction of a house. And I will give him the authority of knowledge, because that is his role and that is his task. Yeah. It is when it comes in my relationship with him, in the manner in which I respect or disrespect, the manner in which we relate, that is when power comes in. But we have to accept authority. Like Krishnamurti says, the authority of the lawyer, the authority of the judge, the authority of the civil engineer, the authority of the policeman. So these are roles and they are given in a particular context. And this is authority which is legal, which is right, which is accepted by your work definition or by the role you are given. It is authority becomes dysfunctional or problematic when it gets linked to influence and control.
Thank you, Jayshree. I think we'll take the last question from Anandji and then close it now. Anandji, please.
Yes, sir. So, madam, I mean, you did say that, he's a better cook or he's a better plumber and things like that. Yes, he doesn't have to become an authority. I'm a great cricket player. I am stronger than him. I am bigger than him. I am more powerful than him. So that should not become an authority. That's my point. Kate did say the authority of a policeman is required. Yes, I have to maintain the rules and regulations on the road. That is very essential. But we're talking about the psychological aspect of it. When I say I know more than you, then there is violence. That is what's happening right now across the globe. The authority leads to violence. There's no doubt about it. I mean, maybe I said to some extent it's okay, to some extent it's not okay. Then I'm back to my conditioning. I'm saying this is good, this is bad. No, it can't be that. Truth is truth. It is the fact that authority is evil. I have to look at it. I'm not condemning it. I don't want to say it's good or bad, but can I see that it is one of the main reasons for the violence which is taking place in the society. It happens in the home. The authority of a father, of a husband, of your older brother and older sister, whatever it is. You see the authority, leads to corruption. That's the point. Plumber, yes, he's good a plumber. If I respect him and he respects me for being what do you call? Maybe a dishwasher. He respects me. I respect him. That's the society of equals. Is what it's what case says is what one should be looking for. Respect each other. That's all. The respect within quotes. I'm using the wrong word actually. Understand. I would say the better word is understand. That's all there is. I appreciate his what he is doing. He appreciates. That's all. That's all there is. So the authority, the moment I say I know more than you, the problem arises. That's the point. That's about all. Nothing else. Thank you.
Absolutely. Because you see, psychological authority, as you say, is absolutely evil. Right? And that is where the problem is. I agree with you entirely.
I think we can take one more question. Thank you, Jayshree, from Dinesh ji.
Sir,
Yeah,
my simple question to madam is, how do I accept JK in my psychological development? Do I accept him as an authority or as a friend or as a teacher or what?
If you ask me for myself, I would say as a friend, as a guide, I can't take him as an authority. He doesn't tell me what to do. So I simply can't take him as an authority. He leaves me entirely to myself. So I'll take him as a friend, as a guide, I guess.
He's a mirror, madam. He's mirroring me.
Absolutely. He points out things within me. So can't take him as an authority. He simply doesn't tell me what to do, which is why people have such difficulty with Krishnamurti. So
I think we have come to the close of the session now. Thank you, Jayshree, so much for being with us and covering so beautifully, very, very difficult subject to start with anyway.
Thank you also. Dubey ji, I want to thank everyone for being so forthright and open in their speaking as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Next Sunday, we'll have Mr. S. Gopalan from the Valley School, and he'll be talking about death, a figment of imagination. So you're all welcome to join at 11 o'clock next Sunday. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dubey sir. Thank you, Speaker Madam.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Modak, now you can close it.